What do you understand by seeing this picture? A girl sees this number as 6 and an old man sees this number as 9. But both of them are correct, according to their point of view. Let's see how.
Topic: Perception. Subject: Psychology. The word perception came from Latin word, perceptio, which means gathering or receiving. Perception is the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the presented information or environment. When our sense organs come in contact with the world and are stimulated by external stimuli and receive sensations, it results in perception. Sensation is the initial response of an individual to a stimulus. Perception is the interpretation of sensory stimuli, which reaches the sense organs and the brain. Interpretation gives meaning to sensation and we become aware of objects. Definition. According to J.H. Jackson, O. Desiderato and D.B. Hawison, perception is the experience of objects, events or relationships obtained by extracting information from and interpreting sensations. According to R.A. Silverman, perception is an individual's awareness aspect of behavior, for it is the way each person processes the raw data he receives from the environment, into meaningful patterns. Principles of perception. Individuals tend to organize environmental stimuli into some meaningful patterns or whole according to certain principles. Some of the important principles are figure-ground relationship, closure, grouping, simplicity, contour, context, contrast, adaptability. 1. Principle of figure-ground relationship. According to principle of figure-ground relationship, a figure is perceived in relationship to its background. The perception of the object or figure in terms of color, size, shape and intensity, etc. depends upon the figure-ground relationship. We perceive a figure against a background or background against a figure depending upon the characteristics of the perceiver as well as the relative strength of the figure or ground. Two. Principle of closure. According to principle of closure, while confronting an incomplete pattern, one tends to complete or close the pattern or fill in sensory gaps and perceive it as a meaningful whole. This type of organization is extremely helpful in making valuable interpretation of various incomplete objects, patterns or stimuli present in our environment. 3. Principle of grouping. Principle of grouping refers to a tendency to perceive stimuli in some organized meaningful patterns by grouping them on some solid basis like similarity, proximity and continuity. On the basis of similarity, objects or stimuli which look alike are usually perceived as a unit. Four. Principle of simplicity. We perceive the simplest possible pattern because they enable the perceiver to perceive the whole from some of its parts. Five. Principle of contour. A contour is said to be a boundary between a figure and its ground. The degree of the quality of this contour separating the figure from the ground is responsible for enabling us to organize stimuli or objects into meaningful patterns. 6. Principle of context. Perceptual organization is also governed by the principle of context, i.e., an examiner may award higher marks to the same answer book in a pleasant context than in an unpleasant one. 7. Principle of contrast. Perceptual organization is very much affected through contrast effects as the stimuli that are in sharp contrast to nearby stimuli may draw our maximum attention and carry different perceptual effects. Example, here the surrounding circles in A make the circle seem larger than the circle in B, even though the two are of the same size. 8. Principle of adaptability. The perceptual organization for some stimuli depends upon the adaptability of the perceiver to perceive similar stimuli. An individual who adapts himself to work before an intense bright light will perceive normal sunlight as quite dim.